In this session, we're going to be discussing Chapter 7 of the book, Getting to Yes. Chapter 7 addresses the situation where you are trying to be a principled negotiator and follow all of the rules of principled negotiation that we've been learning along the way, but the other side won't use principled negotiation. Instead, the other side is a hard bargainer, sticks to positional negotiation. In order to reach a constructive agreement, both sides have to be willing to use principled negotiation. If one side stays in positional bargaining, you will not reach a good agreement. So, what do we do under this situation where we try to be principled, but the other side won't? Your author suggests that there are 3 things you can try to do when you're up against someone who refuses to use principled negotiation. The first one is things that you can do. The second one is things that you can hopefully get the other side to do. And the third thing is how a third party might be able to help you resolve the impasse. The first approach that the author suggests is that you simply continue to use principled negotiations with the hope that it will eventually rub off on the other side. You just continue to use your active listening, you continue to try to find common interests, and maybe, just maybe, the other side will finally back down from their positional bargaining. I think that has happened for a couple of you in your classroom negotiations. The second approach the author suggests is something they call negotiation jujitsu. And these are trying to bring the other side around to using principled negotiation based on your conduct. Number one, first and foremost, the authors urge you not to play the other side's game. If the other side is using positional bargaining, don't respond in kind and then end up with 2 positional bargainers, because in that event, it's very unlikely you will reach agreement. You should instead try to continue to find the interests behind the position that they are espousing. And as we talked about, the way that you can try to do that is ask open-ended questions. Can you help me understand why that amount is a fair amount in your opinion? Can you try to help me understand why you need the grocery store to be at 18 degrees centigrade? The other thing that we talked about earlier, along with these asking open-ended questions, is make ample use of silence. When the other side is taking a hard negotiating position, just pause. Don't say anything. Don't react to it. It's our human nature that we hate silence. And so in order to fill that silence, sometimes what the hard negotiator will do is to fill that silence by trying to explain their position in more detail or why it's something you should accept. And so sometimes we can use silence the same way we can use open-ended questions. They will kind of naturally just want to start talking more to you in order to fill up that space of uncomfortable silence. With respect to your ideas that you're proposing in the negotiations, rather than taking a positional negotiation stance or trying to explain why your position is right, the author suggests that you invite the other side to criticize your ideas and to offer you advice regarding what is wrong with your ideas. Again, with human nature, it's very easy for people to criticize, much easier than offering constructive suggestions. So by inviting criticism, it's also another way that you can try to ascertain what's really going on with the other side. Asking for advice regarding your ideas, one really effective question is to say, what would you do if you were in my shoes? Here we try to take the hard negotiator and get him to understand what's going on with you. The same way that as a principal negotiator, we try to put ourselves in the other side's shoes. So by the use of this questions, it's one way that you can try to get the other side to do the same thing, to make them pause and think about your situation and try to put themselves in your situation. And with that method, oftentimes you can move them toward a discussion toward interest rather than a discussion about positions. The final approach your author suggests is bringing in a third party mediator to try to resolve any impasse between you. The procedure that the author suggests the third party use in trying to mediate the difference is something called a one-text procedure. So this is an atypical mediation where parties go and sit in front of a mediator and discuss their problems and have the mediator try to come up with solutions or way to get it resolved. We'll talk about that form of mediation a little bit later on in the semester. A one-text procedure centers on the mediator creating a single document. And the way the mediator does this is meet separately with both sides to try to ascertain what their interests are. After ascertaining to the best the mediator can what the interests of each party are, the mediator goes and drafts a document trying to merge everybody's interests and to come up with the best of an agreement as the mediator can think of, given the information provided to the mediator so far. Then the mediator takes that proposal, gives it to each party, and asks them to criticize it, to tell the mediator all the things that are wrong with what he or she has put in the proposal. Again, much easier for people to criticize than to necessarily come up with constructive suggestions. The mediator takes both sides' criticisms of the document, goes off and revises it again, taking into account those criticisms, and then comes back and presents the single document to the parties one more time. And the process repeats itself. The revised document is criticized by both sides. The mediator goes off and redrafts the document once again, taking into account the criticisms of each party. And this process continues until the mediator feels that he or she can no longer revise the document, that the mediator has done the best he or she can, given the interests and criticisms of each side. Once the mediator is at that point, the mediator then produces the document, gives it to each of the parties, and the parties have one choice. You either accept it or you reject it. And the parties are free to do either one. But in this way, you have a neutral third party who takes away some of the difficulties in communication by separately meeting with people, by getting their criticisms, and by working toward drafting the best agreement possible given each side's position. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So, when you encounter a negotiator who won't use principal negotiation, try to use one of these three methods. Number one, just keep using principal negotiation and hope it ultimately rubs off on the other side. Number two, try to get the other side to start using principal negotiation on their own by the way you ask them questions, by the way you invite criticism, and by the way you use silence to try to get them to back away from just asserting their position. And finally, if nothing else seems to work and you have the ability and the money to do so, try to bring in a third party. It doesn't need to be a formal mediator. It could be anyone. Try to bring in a third party who can use the one text procedure to try to come up with the best agreement possible given both sides' positions, and then put it to a vote. Do you want to accept it or do you want to reject it?